Star Trek Online, the game made to scratch the itch of wanting to be a part of the universe of the Trekkies. We are met with the choice between 6 factions when we first make our character. They all seem to have their own starting experience, judging from each faction's description. And of course, we're choosing the Klingon Defense Force, being interested in honor and glory and all that. We are not happy with being a normal Klingon though. We need something more spicy, something a bit more scaly. Yes, this will do nicely. A Gorn. Wait, go back. There we go. Perfection. When we decided on making ourselves a budget Godzilla, we got the choice of 3 careers. The engineering officer, which seems to be the more tanky class. The science officer, which seems to be more focused on healing. And lastly, the tactical officer, which seems to be more focused on doing damage. These comparisons are based on the trinity of roles from other games. And being the stereotypical DPS player that I am pretending to be, of course I'll go for the tactical officer. Now, let's continue with the creation of our amazingly realistic Godzilla lookalike. We were greeted with a rather in-depth character customization that I really didn't spend too much time in, because the game made our Godzilla for us. Magic. And then, of course, I named our creation after myself, obviously. And our ship had to be called something a bit more creative. I entered the game to be met with a tutorial. I was told that I was the second officer aboard this ship. I needed to do a lot of talking with different people, because I was about to end my shift. The tutorial on how the movement was key mapped, the interaction keys, and almost everything I needed to know was voice acted in the tutorial. That's a really nice touch. Not only was the tutorial voice acted, the quest text were also voiced. And that made my experience at the beginning of the game a lot smoother. Anyway, I needed to change my user interface, which I could easily do. I was told that I needed some combat training, so I went down to where the simulation were taking place and I shot all the targets. And after a successful training session, I patted myself on the back and I finished up my shift and went to bed. Only to be awakened to an explosion. And suddenly, we had intruders aboard our ship. We had to take action and get these intruders cleared out. And in doing so, we found an encrypted message, implying that our captain was the one that had orchestrated the attack. The first officer challenged the captain only to lose. But now, I am the first officer, and I don't intend to lose to a pathetic opponent like him. So I challenged the boss man. Say hello to Captain the Nurk. It didn't take long for us to get into space combat, and this far the game has felt really good in my opinion. But sadly, the space combat was slow. Really slow at times, which made it feel more like a chore instead of something new and exciting. To be fair, the space combat did improve when I learned how to properly fight with a ship. Sadly, that didn't happen until 5 minutes before the timer was up. So I would say that if the game had as good of a tutorial for the ship combat as they had for the rest of the starting experience, that would have made the game even more fun. So that's both a positive and a negative. But in sum, it's positive in my book. The detail I'm missing in the tutorial is the mention of having to face the enemy ship for you to be able to use your hardest hitting ability, the missiles. Thought I should mention it so that you could be aware of it from the start if you feel like trying out the game. While we're on the subject of combat, the ground combat was It was not the most exciting combat I've encountered. It was decent, but that's it. It felt slow but responsive, and it did help that you could bring companions or crewmates with you on missions. That's an aspect I really like. It makes the world feel alive in a way. It's clear to me now that the game's focus lies on the space combat, and that's understandable, but the ground combat should have been fine-tuned a bit more in my opinion. I'm not a Trekkie. I don't have a lot of knowledge of Star Trek from before playing Star Trek Online. So for me, the story in Star Trek Online was clear and easy to get into from the start. I understood what my purpose was and why I did what I did. I'm not going to get into specifics other than what I've shown from the tutorial, but I actually had fun playing the game. Although, I'm a little bit confused on how the quest rewards and how the loot system works in Star Trek Online. So let's start with the loot that could drop from enemies. There wasn't a lot of loot, but when I got something dropped, it was useful to me in most situations. So it didn't feel like the game cluttered me with all the junk that other games do, just to get me to buy more bank space. And about the quest rewards, I usually got greens or common items from the quests, but suddenly I got an epic or very rare item for my ship. That felt really nice. I don't know if that's a guarantee for everyone, but still, it felt really good getting that item. And that's how loot should feel in my opinion. Impactful and good. If I were to point out some of the negatives about the game for me, it would be about the graphics and the movement. Firstly, it's understandable that the graphics are outdated considering the game was first released in 2010, but some touch-ups wouldn't hurt, and the movement feels clunky and not very smooth. These aren't huge negatives in any way, but I can see these two factors causing an increased build-up of annoyance the longer I would play. That's not for certain, and I might be gravely mistaken. To sum up my experience with Star Trek Online after 2 hours of gameplay, I was pleasantly surprised with the tutorial, and I learned almost all I needed to know from that, which kinda would make the tutorial a success in my book. The voice acting was decent, but it still made me feel more immersed in the game, regardless of the quality of the voice acting. The combat was this game's weak point, until I learned how to actually fight in space. Then it became a bit more fun. But the ground combat was subpar for my taste. Something that made the ground combat just a bit more enjoyable was the companions I could bring into missions. That made up for a tiny part of the quality. Now, to answer the question, does this game make it onto my list of games I will be doing a more in-depth playthrough of? And the answer is yes. Now that I'm aware of the details surrounding the space combat, I think the game would be even more enjoyable and worth giving another shot. Do you plan on trying out Star Trek Online, or have you already played it? Let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified whenever the next episode gets released. Thanks for watching, see you in the next one.